Good morning and welcome to Sem-May World News Daily Bulletin 1. Today is the 1st of October 2025, and I decided to start this just to keep everyone quickly recapped or quickly up to date on what's happening in world news currently. We're going to start with Africa, and former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila has been sentenced to death in absentia for war crimes and treason. Now, absentia basically means that there was a trial that took place and he was not present in the trial, and he was sentenced nevertheless. The changes concern accusations that Kabila has been supporting the M23 rebel group who have wreaked devastation across the country's eastern region. Kabila was convicted on Friday by a military court of transition for crimes against humanity and war crimes, including murder, sexual assaults, torture, and insurrection. He denied charges but did not appear in court to defend himself. The ex-president rejected the case as arbitrary and said that the courts were being used as an instrument of oppression. His current whereabouts are unknown. He did spend some time in South Africa in 2023. That's a known fact, before leaving back to his country. So currently he's AWOL. Taking you to Asia, and rescuers are racing to pull dozens of students and workers from under the rubble of a school building that collapsed in East Java, Indonesia. 3 people have been killed and 99 others hospitalized, some of them with critical and the death toll may rise. At least 38 others, many of them teenage boys, remain trapped under the A.I. Kozini Islamic Board School in the eastern Java town of Sidoarjo. They had gathered for prayers when the building gave way on Monday. The 2-story building had an unstable foundation and could not support the weight of the construction of 2 more floors. So, of course, investigations will be undertaken as to why and how that building was passed. And I think let this be a lesson learned to everyone around the world, especially when dealing with educational institutes. You know, you're putting lives at risk, young lives at risk, and young lives are the blood and the heartbeat of any nation. So very sad to see that this incident that took place in Indonesia, and I do hope that the perpetrators are brought to books. Taking you now to South America, saying a very good morning to everyone on TikTok Live as well as on Twitch. You may leave your comments. I can probably see your comments a bit later, and I'll respond to them tomorrow. You can let me know what's going on in your part of the world as well. As I said, I'm just covering just a bit of one news item every single day, and keeping it as short as possible. But you can let me know whichever country you're from and what's going down there. Taking you to South America now, and a humanitarian convoy led by Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa was attacked and 17 soldiers taken hostage. And this was on Sunday night. Carolina Jaramillo, the government spokeswoman, said the convoy, which included UN and EU diplomats, were delivering aid to affected communities during the national strike when ambushed by about 350 people who attacked it with Molotov cocktails. And Molotov cocktails, also known as homemade bombs, basically are bottles normally that's filled with some substance that can ignite, normally fuel, petrol or something, also known as petrol bombs, just with a material wick, and that's burnt and tossed, and when it lands it explodes and can cause quite a bit of damage. The country's largest indigenous rights group, leading a strike over fuel subsidy cuts, said a member was shot dead by the armed forces during the protest. Now, the president has moved to do away with fuel subsidy cuts. It's quite confusing as to why the indigenous rights groups are actually protesting this, because if you have a look at the subsidy cuts or the subsidies, the fuel subsidies, it actually benefited the more higher earning income, the more business owners, than it did the man at ground level. So the government's reason of doing away with the subsidies was that the subsidies were bringing about a bit of an inequality in Ecuador. So, and they mentioned that these subsidy cuts, even though they will push up fuel prices, it will not affect public transport. So it's very weird that the indigenous groups, rights groups, are striking, most probably because jobs will be affected. But the president of Ecuador says that there's a Venezuelan mafia that's actually behind the strike, and also not just fueling the strike, but also paying for the strike to take place. The UN Human Rights Council's region representative, Jan Jarab, called for an urgent dialogue after the acts of violence and a probe into the death and injuries. So I'll keep you updated as to what's going on in that strike, to get to the bottom as well as to why the indigenous people are actually striking this and who is behind it. Yes, taking you now to Australia. And this is quite serious. A sunscreen scandal in Australia is continuing to grow, with 18 products now pulled from shelves in the skin cancer hotspot over safety concerns. Analysis by a consumer advocacy group in June found several popular and expensive sunscreens did not provide the protection claimed by their makers. One product, Ultraviolet's Lean Screen Skin Screen, is supposed to offer a skin protection factor, that's SPF, of 50 plus, but instead returned a result of SPF 4 and was voluntarily recalled in August. An investigation by the medicines regulator has now warned about 20 more sunscreens from other brands which share the same base formula and raise significant concerns about testing laboratory, and those will be also pulled from the shelf, hopefully. Now, the worrying bit here is that more than 20 of these manufacturers are using the same laboratory to actually test their product, and the base formula is coming from one company alone. So that one company has stopped the production of the sunscreen, and that's good to see. But they say they're from their side they are okay. So they now need to look at what's happening in the lab. Why is the lab giving an SPF 50 when there's only an SPF 4 on the product? And more worrying factor is that there is a huge company in Australia that manufactures in Australia but does not supply to Australia. In fact, it supplies internationally. So this can become a huge international conspiracy, given that sunscreen is becoming a bit more popular now in current day, with the efforts in preventing skin cancer and growing efforts to gain protection from harsher sun. Taking you to Europe, a Ukrainian national has been arrested by police in Poland on suspicion of involvement in a series of explosions that blew up the Nord Stream gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea. The man, identified as a trained diver called Vladimir Z. That's pretty weird. That's pretty ironic because of course Vladimir Z is also the president of Ukraine. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any connection there. But so far, Ukrainians government say there are none. So Vladimir Z was detained under a European arrest warrant in the early hours of yesterday in a town near Warsaw. Several months into Russia's full-scale invasion, 3 of the 4 Nord Stream gas pipelines from Russia to Germany were ruptured by explosives, and they are going to now try and deduce if it was the same guy that has been blowing up the pipelines, or whether it's one of many who have been working together. So the mystery has long surrounded the blasts, and no one admitted ordering the attack. Ukraine denied involvement. Russia came under Western suspicion, and Moscow blamed the US and UK. So I think that this can rule them out as well. But as the story develops, we'll bring you an update. Taking you now to North America. This is quite a long one. And quite a strange one as well, because we have leaders coming together and they are agreeing to work together whilst they are together, and then when they separate, it becomes a different story. Now, Donald Trump's framework agreement for ending the Gaza war and reconstructing the devastated territory has momentum behind it. Much of it comes from the president himself. Momentum comes too from leading Arab and Islamic countries who have supported the plan, including Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Turkey. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, standing next to Donald Trump, accepted it too, despite the fact that it contains talk of a pathway to a Palestine that he has repeatedly denounced. To keep the pace up, Trump says that that Hamas has 3 to 4 days to decide whether say yes or no. 3 to 4, it's not very exact, is it? But let's see what happens on the 4th day. If the answer is no, the war goes on. The proposed deal looks a lot like a plan put forward by Joe Biden well over a year ago, but since then there has been massive killing in Palestine civilians of Palestine civilians, more destruction in Gaza, and now famine, while Israeli hostages in Gaza have had to endure months of agony and captivity. So it has been proposed before. It hasn't proved to be successful. There were many reports in the Israeli media that the Biden initiative failed because Netanyahu moved the goalposts with a new set of demands under pressure from the hard right in his cabinet. Whether it was only from his cabinet or whether it's something that he personally feels, I think the last statement will show that. Even so, the framework plan is a significant moment. For the first time, Donald Trump is putting pressure on Israel to end the war. Donald Trump has made himself into a leader to whom it is hard to say no. Nobody wants to end up getting the roasting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky received in the Oval Office back in February. But things can change when leaders leave the White House, as we'll see. Before Benjamin Netanyahu left Washington, D.C. to go back to Israel, his staff filmed him putting over his version of events. One element was the idea of an independent Palestine next to Israel, the two-state solution which the UK and other Western countries have tried to revive by recognizing Palestine as its own state. The Trump document gives an indeterminate nod to the idea of Palestine's independence. It says that after the reform of the Palestinian Authority, which is based in Ramallah and led by President Mohammed Abbas, conditions, and quote, may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Even though even the thought of a distant prospect of a Palestinian state was too much for Netanyahu, who had given wholehearted support to Trump at the White House, telling him in English, "I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims." And it's quite surprising that, by this, Benjamin did not misunderstand Donald Trump's document and his request as well, but he's given his word in White House. Now, on the video, getting his message out in Hebrew to the people back home before the long flight home, Netanyahu is asked if he agrees to a Palestinian state, and he says, "No, absolutely not. It's not even written in the agreement. But we did say one thing, that we would forcibly resist a Palestinian state. And according to him, Trump, he said, agrees. So, which is the correct story? We'll need to know whether Netanyahu disagreed in the White House to Trump's request, or whether Trump is agreeing to there not being a Palestinian state. As we said, this is the first time that Donald Trump is putting pressure on Israel to end the war. Whatever the case is, I think these men need to put their egos aside and see that this is to the detriment of women, children, and innocent people around the world. And as is the case with many countries, I think it's very, very important that world leaders start thinking about citizens, making decisions for the benefit of the citizens, and see that the citizens need to identify that and see that. And when it comes to voting, if there's a democratic voting in place, when it comes to voting as well, people really need to think hard and long as to who they put in power. I'm on no one's side. I do not take any affiliation to any certain political party or leader, but I would just like to see political leaders do what they're supposed to do and work for the best of their citizens. Bringing you to South Africa, US tariffs on South Africa have already begun to show repercussions when a young man, a worker at an automobile company, spoke to international news agency Al Jazeera that he has started to put plans in place to find alternative employment, as the company that he was working for or is currently working for notified them of a restructure that was to result in the layoffs of numerous staff, including himself. He says that his name is also on the list, including other of his fellow workers as well. Now, the restructure was due to a drop in demand, according to him. And of course, this definitely is a direct knockoff effect of the 30% tariff hike on South African goods exported to the United States imposed by US President Donald Trump in August this year. It's a very scary situation in South Africa because at the moment unemployment is at its highest, and now we have these tariffs which are, as you see, resulting in more jobs being lost. And it's all good to think, okay, I'm going to now get out as soon as possible before it becomes an issue and find works elsewhere, but work is not readily available. And especially if you do not have a qualification, even those who are qualified are struggling to get jobs in South Africa. So it is a major concern at the moment, and it is a growing concern as well. Staying in South Africa, and this is a bit of a quirky one, and ending with this, taking you to the city of Durban, which is on the east coast of South Africa. There's a town called Morningside, which is quite popular with its eateries and restaurants, a good nightlife as well. There was a guy, his name is not given, but this was on Monday evening. So he went to one of the popular Italian restaurants, and this was in Morningside, and he ordered food to his heart's and stomach content to the value of 1,500 rand. To put that into perspective, in dollars, it's just over $100. And when it came time to pay the bill, he said he had no money. So I'm sure he ordered the most expensive of stuff, the most expensive wines. And the restaurant's manager, instead of letting him go, said, okay, what you can do is to pay off that 1,500 rand, do the dishes for the day. And whilst he was doing that, they called in the police to come through, and the young man was arrested. And imagine, I think this was the first case that someone actually got arrested for not paying a sitting dining bill as well. But I guess the person most expensive and the most affected, and I wouldn't want to be the person, is the waiter, who normally will receive a 10% tip from that and goes home with nothing. So that's the wrap of your first bulletin of Sem-May World News. It'll be much earlier tomorrow, probably So we'll start around, say, give it 3 hours earlier as well. So if you want to join in there, let me know as well in comments what's going on in your part of the world, and I can not address that, but present that tomorrow. You have yourself a fantastic day, whichever part of the world you are in, or a fantastic evening. If you're getting your morning started as well, just waking up, make sure you have a beautiful morning and have the best day ahead. For Sem-May News, my name is Kaalan Pillay.
Sem-May.